In honor of the release of our new free 360 wing and 410 setups on the free membership site, I figured I would do a video and cover what is probably the most important component on the wing sprint cars outside of the wing, of course. So stick around. What's up, everybody? Thomas Brandon here. Thank you very much, as always, for joining me. And like I said, we're going to be taking a look at a very, very important component on the winged sprint cars. Now, when it comes to the winged sprint cars, essentially, real life here in the sim, obviously, the wings are probably the most important aspect of the car. I mean, because of the downforce they generate, the way that the car, hooks up, all the stuff that happens, the wings are essentially, the key, right? What can you do? How can you get that thing to work with the least amount of drag, the most amount of downforce? You can get the most amount of speed out of the car and maintain the highest level of momentum, right? That's essentially what you're trying to do. Now, the mechanical aspects of that are really, really critical as well, because it can drastically improve the balance of the car depending on, the wing and all that stuff like that. So with our new build that we had some interesting changes to the setups of the car, and in my opinion, the biggest change, and obviously, and also the most important, is on the left rear corner of the car, and I'm talking about the bump rubber and packer. Now, in real life, the bump rubber and packer, there are so many different things that you can do with these in real life. Okay, so there's, if you look at it, a lot of your regular teams, even your like regional teams, they're going to basically be running a pretty standardized bump rubber. They're going to have a soft, a medium, and a hard. That's really it. They're going to be running one of three. And it's going to depend on the track state, what track they're at, the track type, right? You're going to be running a different bump rubber at an Eldora versus a Kokomo, okay? So it really just depends. And the bump rubber is really what's going to control the mechanical load on that left rear. Now, the reason we say mechanical load is because obviously you've got the aerodynamic load that's being provided by the wing, but that force has got to go through the mechanics of the car, right? The suspension of the car. And so that mechanical load is greatly determined by that left rear bump rubber. Now, that bump rubber is not just a set and forget adjustment anymore in the sim. It basically, I think we ran the same bump rubber like always, 500 pounds. Like that's what we ran. We ran a 500-pound bump rubber with an 1.5-inch or 2-inch packer. If it was a bigger track, I would usually run a 2-inch packer. If it was a smaller track, I'd run an 1.5 inch. That was it, okay? And for the most part, you didn't really feel the difference if you changed the packer or the bump rubber, right? You have the packer a little bit because it would wing over a little bit more, but the bump rubber, you didn't really feel the difference. Now, you feel the difference, and it has a massive effect on the car. So much so, I've had a ton of people asking me, hey man, how do I tune this thing? What do I do? What am I looking for? What should I start off with? What should I go to if the track slicks off? What should I do if the track stays tacky? Like all of these different things. So we're going to cover that in this video. I'm going to show you a couple of examples, kind of the extremes so you can see, and then we'll take a look at it in telemetry. I'll actually show you the data behind it, the way that I calculate it, okay? And so you can see those differences and how it actually affects the car. All right, so let's head over to the track and take a look. All right, so we're here. We're at Knoxville. I chose Knoxville just because that's where the officials are this week in the 410s. We do have the 410 sprint car. And also, I think it's next week is the Knoxville Nationals on the sim. So we got a couple weeks of Knoxville ahead, so I just chose that. So that way you guys have a relevant example. Now, I've got the iRacing Knoxville setup on here. And if we look at this, pretty much I think it's like every one of their setups. It's got a 500-pound left rear bumper with a 3/4 inch shim, or 0.750 shim, okay? Now, this for the most part is pretty much fine. Like you could use this pretty much everywhere and be okay. In fact, a lot of the setups that I did for the free setups, which if you didn't see the announcement, we just uploaded the free setups for the 360s and the 410s. They're on the free membership site on schoolofsimracing.net. So if you want to check that out, link down in the description below. But I'm running pretty much a similar type of situation where we're running pretty consistent bump rubber and packer. There are a couple situations where I do have it changed, but it's not very far. It's not like you're going to see a 500 in qual and then a 2000 in the feature. Okay, I'm not doing that. And the reason is because, like I said before, track state, your driving style, and what else you've got going on with the setup all make a difference. This is one of the best factors or best things with this current build, is that the garage is essentially your oyster. You can do almost whatever you want, right? As long as it's not ridiculous. Meaning, if I stick a 950 in the right front with 1050s everywhere else, and I put a 2,000 pound left rear bump rubber with a 4-inch packer, the car's not going to work. Okay, it doesn't matter how my driving style is, the car's not going to work, right? So it's got to be within reason. But essentially, you can get this thing to work however fits your driving style, whatever your driving style is, all right? And you can be fast. That's the beautiful thing about it. The key to these cars is keeping them straight now, man. Just like real life, it's all about keeping them straight, keeping them hooked up, keeping them straight, maintaining that momentum, being consistent. So whatever you got to do to the setup to get that out of your driving, do it. Go for it, man. And it's really, really good. It really is. It opens this up for so many people. So when we look at this bump rubber, all right, we talked about this in the review, and if you hadn't seen this, we'll go through it. Essentially, you have a 0, meaning no bump rubber, all the way up to 2,000, and essentially it goes in 250-pound increments, okay? Now, in real life, like I said earlier, regional teams and stuff like that, local teams, they're going to be running essentially like a soft, a medium, and a hard. That's what they run, okay? When you get up to, obviously, all-stars, outlaws, things like that, now you're talking about really fine-tuning that load, that bump rubber. And you'll see teams that will run, digressive or progressive style bump rubbers. Like there's all kinds of stuff that they can do with these things. So it can really, really open up. And when you get into digressive and progressive and stuff like that, it can really confuse people. So it's actually probably a good thing that we don't have that on here. All right. But with the bump rubber, you've got that, and then you've also got the packer. Now, the packer, you can essentially have 0 all the way up to 4 inches. And this is huge. If we take this real quick, if we look at this right now, and this is the feature setup, we're on like an 80% track or something. And you can see right here, our left rear ride height is 11.7 inches. If I put a 4-inch shim in here, it actually changes the ride height. That means that this thing is now, it is on the bump rubber at all times. Okay, the shim has engaged that bump rubber. All right, so this packer is crucial for not only controlling when the bump rubber engages, but also essentially the platform of the car. And the platform of the car is going to affect the loads and of the right rear, and specifically the right front. Okay, remember, weight transfer, it's an X. All right, it always goes like that. It's corner to corner, then we look at side to side, front to back. All right, but it's always corner to corner first. You go loading this left rear, you're gonna have load on that right front, period. All right, now when this thing wings over, this does obviously control some of how that right rear bites. But if you're going to extremes, it's going to really affect that right front. All right, so let's do this. Let's go out here. Let's do just a couple of laps. I'll record the telemetry on here. We've got just the iRacing one with 500-pound bump rubber with a 3/4-inch shim. All right, and we'll just do a lap around the top and a lap around the bottom. We'll just keep it nice and simple. All right. And right now, I'm not worried too much about lap time, just running the laps and being smooth so we can look at the data. All right, so that's our 750, or excuse me, 500 with our 3/4 inch shim. Now, what we're gonna do is we'll go to the extreme on the bump rubber just so you can see the difference. Okay, we'll go to the extreme on the bump rubber. You can see increasing that rate did not change the ride height. Okay, so the bump rubber size is going to be essentially the same. It's the packer that's going to control that. So now we've got a 2,000 pound bump rubber. Now remember, the load of the rate of that bump rubber is largely going to be on what you want to run is going to be determined by the mechanical leverage of the car. If you don't have the leverage to load that, you're going to have handling issues. So you're going to have to be, for example, for like a 2,000 pound left rear bump rubber, you're going to have to be on throttle a whole lot more to keep that thing loaded. Because you see right there how it kind of pushed? This is where also using brake would come into play, because you can help keep the car winged over if you know how to do it. One thing I've noticed about the braking when you use brakes now on this is that it can be fast, but you've got to do it correctly. I mean, you're really having to use 2 feet. You're wanting to be like on throttle but dragging brake, and it's like, you know, using them at the same time, and it's just like in real life. You've got to be able to do it like that. So anyways, 2 runs. All right, let's pull up Motec here real quick. The first lap was around the top, then we did a lap around the bottom. All right, now if we go to the garage, just so you can see here, our colored lines are going to be the 500 pound bump rubber. Our white line is going to be the 2,000 pound bump rubber. Okay, so first of all, when we take a look at the ride heights, we can see here, if we look at the corner, obviously, because we have a much stiffer left rear bump rubber, our left rear ride height on average through the corner is a lot higher. In fact, it's about 4/10 of an inch. I know that doesn't sound like much, but when you're talking about, you know, using packers, right, and that are literally 1/4 inch values, that's a pretty big deal. Okay, now where it gets really noticeable is in the loads. So this is my load section here. These are maths that I created on how to calculate the loads with the torsion bars and stuff like that. And I also have one now for calculating the bump rubber load. And keep in mind, the bump rubber is not always engaged. Okay, so factoring in the packer and all that stuff like that, it gives us a load on this bump rubber. If we look here, the white line, you can see we're hardly even on the graph because it's so much higher. It's essentially double, okay? Just through the turn, if we look through turn 2 here, our average load on that left rear bump rubber was 1,358 pounds, all right? On a 2,000 pound bump rubber. On the 500 pound bump rubber, our average load was 671, okay? So what does that tell us? Well, that tells us that on the softer bump rubber, it's compressing a whole lot more, right? It's actually compressing more than an inch, obviously, because we're loading it more than 500 pounds. Where the 2,000 pound bump rubber, we're not even compressing it an inch, right? Now, when we look at our left rear load overall, it is about the same as it was, right, in terms of overall load, because the bump rubber is essentially there's slight variations because of the bar is going to have an effect too, even though they're the same, but for the most part, it's just the bump rubber, okay? But if we look at the right rear, this is really important. Our stiffer bump rubber, we're putting less load on the right rear. Now you might be wondering, like, well, how's that possible? If the left rear is loading, right, and it's not winging over as much, shouldn't we be loading the right rear more? Well, not necessarily, because the car's not lowering as much because it's got that much stiffer bump rubber. Yes, we're loading that left rear more because of that bump rubber, but the right rear is actually getting less load because the car's not sucking down as much. This is why that bump rubber is so important. It controls, I shouldn't say controls, but has an effect on the entire car. So putting in the stiffest bump rubber and just calling it a day, right? Like, could you build the setup around that? I guess you could, but it's going to have an effect on the right rear. If we look at our forward bite and side bite numbers, for our forward bite, it's pretty much the same. We're only looking at about a 7-point difference on average to the corner, so not that big a deal, which is kind of to be expected because we're on throttle so much, okay? But our side bite, we're looking at almost a 20-point difference, which is that's a noticeable change. And if we look at this on the bottom, now we're seeing about a 25-point change, and on the forward bite it's basically the same. And then on our loads for the bump rubber, right, on the left and the right, now we're seeing about the same on the right rear, same load on the right rear, because we're going much slower, the car's not sucking down as much, it's basically the same. And then our left rear load is about 350 in terms of the difference, okay? So speed plays a role in this. This is that mechanical leverage aspect that I was talking about, all right? Now, what if we take, let's put the 500 back on. What if we take this and we put a bigger shim? How is that going to affect us? Well, let's go out and let's take a look. Now remember, the shim not only controls when the bump rubber engages, but it also controls the platform of the car. So notice how the car is not winging over nearly as much as it was before, right? We're essentially flatter and kind of sliding through the corner. We're not really winging over. The car is also a lot tighter, like we gotta almost, see how, look at that, it's just straightening out through the corner. Look at that, we're just kind of sliding through, and then it gets loaded. The car's just falling over the right front. But you can see how much flatter the car is through the corner. And it's not comfortable at all. In fact, it's very uncomfortable. If we look at, let's take a look at this last lap here, the winged over platform of it. So this is with the 4-inch packer, okay? And then we look at, in that same spot, see how much more the car's winged over? It's not even close, right? It's so much more winged over. it's noticeable. All right, so now we need to make, our white line is going to be our original one, 500 with a 3/4 inch shim, and then the colored lines is the 500 with the 4-inch shim, okay? And you can see this in the garage. 500-pound bump rubber, 4-inch shim on the colored, okay? So come back over here. Ride heights are obviously going to be a huge difference. Where, through the corner, right, we're basically almost 2 inches higher, okay? And we could see that in the car as we were going through the corner. But now here's the really interesting aspect of this. You would think that would make the right rear lower, right? Since the left rear is so much higher, but it doesn't. It's actually lowering the right front. The right front is more than a 1/2 inch lower, and the right rear is actually higher. It's a few tenths higher, because remember that back end, that's a straight axle in there. You got a solid rear end back there. So that thing, if it can't drop on the left rear, it's going to hold that right rear up too, okay? Just because the left rear goes down, or the left rear doesn't go down, doesn't mean that it's getting side bite on that right rear. So that's a huge thing right there. Also, if we look at our loads here, this is going to be a big difference, because keep in mind, remember, same bump rubber, but the load is going to be different because that packer is controlling when that thing is loaded. Now, this bump rubber, we've got times where on the white lines, remember that's a 3/4 inch packer, where it's not even engaged, right? Because that packer is so small and that bump rubber is so soft. But on the 4-inch shim, we are loading that thing just through the corner. We're averaging 900, over 960 pounds of load on that bump rubber alone, okay? And that's because that 4-inch shim, and we're basically forcing that thing to compress more, right? That's huge. That's almost at like adding another 500-pound bump rubber on there. So that's a big, big difference. Plus, we're losing load on the right rear. All right. So that's huge, huge, huge difference in the way that the car is I should say, in the way that the platform of the car is working. We're not getting that sucked down, all right, because of the Packer. It's basically holding it up. We're increasing the load on the left rear, but we're also losing load on the right rear. So really, really big difference with that Packer in there. All right. So I wanted to just kind of show you that so you guys could see what was going on. And if we look at this in terms of the let's take a look at that was the lap. Whoops. That. If we look at this around the bottom and we look at our traction, we can see that we're losing traction too. All right. Remember, our color lines is with that Packer. We're losing traction because even though that left rear's got so much more load in it, everything else doesn't. So we're losing that traction. We've got more wheel spin in the car. So it's just, right? Does that mean never run a 4-inch Packer? No, that's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is, though, is there's a time and a place for these things. Don't just go throwing it in there thinking like, oh, I'm going to get more side bite because it's not going to wing over. That's not the way that it works, okay? So that leads us to, obviously, the $1,000,000 question. Well, how do these work? What should we be doing? What should we be looking for? Well, let's dive into that next. All right, so first things first, when you are looking at your setup, okay, you want to be looking at this on a tacky track because that's where you're going to be starting off with it. All right, I recommend most people start off with essentially what I would call a 5/5 to a 1/1, meaning a 500-pound bump rubber with the 5-inch or a half-inch shim up to a 1,000-pound bump rubber and a 1-inch shim. The reason why I say that is because if you are newer to this and you don't know, essentially, right, you're not using telemetry, you can't see the ride height, you don't know if this thing's bottoming out or digging in or anything like that, or maybe you don't drive the car super hard, right? Sticking a really stiff bumper rubber in there. If you're someone who's not like, just really manhandling the car, you might find that the car's doing things and you don't know what it is, right? You don't know what's causing it and when it can be the bump rubber. And that's really important, okay? Always remember, like I said before, you got to have the mechanical leverage to be able to take advantage of those bump rubbers. If you are somebody who's not on throttle that much, right? Or maybe you are someone who's really, smooth with the throttle and you're really light with the wheel and stuff. You go sticking a super stiff bump rubber in there, at certain tracks, that thing's going to be pogo sticking on the left rear. So that seems to be a really good range to start with, and then you can adjust from there. Yes, you can go outside of that range. I'm talking about for people who are newer to this, all right? Start somewhere in there, okay? If you have let's say you've got a 500 and you're going into the corner with the 3/4 inch shim and you're going into the corner, you notice that the car's snapping loose on you, chances are the car's bottoming out, so you're going to want to increase this Packer, okay, to keep it off the ground. That's why you want to really test this and really play around with it, all right, and get a feel for it. If the car on throttle is wanting to shove that nose in like it feels like it's just got way too much left rear drive, try going down on that left rear bump rubber, okay? Likewise, if you're hitting the throttle and it feels like that car is wanting to drive around, not slide around, drive around. Like you're like, man, right rear's got a little too much grip. I need more left rear drive. Try increasing that bump rubber. All right. Now, as far as the Packer is concerned, the Packer is what you're going to use to control that platform. And remember, that Packer will also affect the load of the bump rubber, like we looked at with that 4-inch shim. Okay, it doubled the load of that bump rubber because it's engaging it that much more. So the Packer is going to also fine tune the load of that bump rubber and then control the winged over platform of the car. All right. Remember, we obviously want the left rear stuck. We want that back end down because that's what's going to give us grip. But we also want to have, some bite with the right rear coming into the corner. All right. So we don't want it to wing over so much. Even if it does stick the left rear, we're going to be pulling bite off the right rear if it's too far. We get down and out. So remember, we want that thing to be nice and even. We're looking for that good even drive coming off the corner. All right, that's what's going to give you that speed, especially when the track starts slicking off. You want to be able to roll into that throttle and have that thing go. Okay? So play around with the bump rubber a little bit. Really test it, right? Try it. Get a feel for it. Run laps, see how it is, and then make a change and feel that difference. Because I'm telling you guys, in all the testing I've done, and I've done a lot, okay, that left rear bump rubber and packer has a huge effect on the car. And when you start changing it, and you start making adjustments on shocks and bars and everything, I mean, it the variations of what you can have in the setup is really insane. It really is. And I know that because I've had some people be like, oh, well, hey, you know, so and so they run this the whole time. That's awesome. Great for them. If it works, run it. Okay, because that's the key. At the end of the day, what works best for you? All right. So get out there, test, play around, see what you got. Try it in the tacky and in the slick. Try it on, you know, with no fuel, with low fuel and lots of fuel. Really get a feel for it, and also get a feel for how the wing affects it, because that has a big effect on it as well. And you can have a car that feels really good. Now the track's slicking off, and you move that wing back a notch or two, and the next thing you know, you're like, damn, this thing sucks, because it can affect the car that much. It really can. All right. All right, you guys. So that's going to do it all for this video. I hope this little quick walkthrough and visual kind of helped you guys some. Like I said, get out there, play around with it, you know, do some changes, extreme changes, just so you can get a feel of it, right? You know, try running a soft bump rubber with a thick packer, and then vice versa. Try running a stiff bump rubber with no packer. Try running no packer and no bump rubber, just to get a feel for those different aspects, and then really start fine-tuning it. Get yourself a base setup. All right, whether it's the iRacing setup or one of our free setups or the insider setups or whoever you get setups from, it doesn't matter. Just get a base setup and then start changing that bumper. Don't change anything else, but change that bumper over and see how it affects the car. Because I think you'll be amazed at what it can do and what it can help you with in terms of the handling of the car, because it really does have a big effect. There's a lot of times now when I'm doing the insider stuff where before I'd be like, well, maybe it's this, maybe it's the shock, or maybe I need to change the bar. And now 9 times out of 10, I'm asking myself, do I need to adjust the bump rubber? Like, I mean, because it can have that kind of effect on it. Like, I'm always having to eliminate that first before I do anything else. The left rear corner of these cars now is critical. I mean, obviously it's always been important, but on the sim now, it is critical. You got to get that right if you want to get everything else right. You really do, because if that thing's bouncing like a pogo stick back there, you're going to be screwed. I don't care who you are. I don't care how good of a driver you are. You're just going to be screwed. All right. So play around with it, get a feel for it. And then, like I said, you know, start fine tuning that and see what you can come up with. Now, like I mentioned earlier, we did just upload the free setups for the 360 and 410 winged sprint cars. They're on the SSR free membership site, so you can go over and download those. They're essentially just base setups, okay? They're designed for you to build off of, all right? And so I tested them at multiple tracks. Keep in mind, though, now with the track states the way that they are, meaning that you can go into tracks and get different moisture levels and stuff like that. You know, you might have some where they feel great one time, and then you go back to the same track and you're like, damn, this thing sucks, right? So that's a kind of a really important factor with this new build. And so that's why I say they're more base setups. They're designed for you to really kind of build off of, okay? But if you want those, they're free. You can get them on the free membership site. The free late model and big block setups, along with the just the late model and big block setups, those will be coming here in the next couple weeks. As far as like free midget and non-wing setups, sprint car setups, those will be coming eventually. I just don't know when. Like I've said numerous times before, you know, with the two businesses now, with the glass business and this, I'm literally working about 120 hours a week. I've had, you know, like 7 days off this year. It's freaking August. You know what I mean? So it's just, I've been super busy. It's not going to be slowing down anytime soon, which, like I say all the time, it's a good problem to have. I'm not complaining. It's just, you know, I'm just super busy, you know. So I'll get to those as soon as I can and get them finished and uploaded for you guys. If you want to join me, I do live stream a couple nights a week. In fact, I'll be live streaming tonight at the time of recording this. I don't know. I think this video will be out. Hoping it'll be out today, but it'll probably be out the next day. But anyways, I do live stream a couple nights a week. So if you want to join me for that, we do dirt racing, oval racing, just whatever we can find. You know, plus, you know, I got league races, all kinds of stuff. Our NARC league is going to be kicking off here very soon on the dirt side. We've even got an asphalt league coming as well to the National Auto Racing Club. So that's going to be a lot of fun here in another month or so when we get that thing rolling. So I'm definitely looking forward to that. So if you want to check any of that stuff out, join us for any of those things. Links for everything down in the description below. And then obviously the live streams are here on YouTube, so just make sure you subscribe and you know, hit the notification bell, all that other good stuff that every other YouTuber on earth asks you to do. So if you want to do that, hey, do it. I'll appreciate it. But anyways, you guys, that's going to do it. Thank you very much as always for joining me. And until next time, I want to wish you good luck, good racing. Take care.